Buenos días de nuevo a todos y todas. Vamos a acelerar un poco para empezar este primer plenario del Congreso Ibérico de la Bicicleta y la Ciudad. Además, lo vamos a hacer desde este balcón atlántico con mirada transatlántica. Pocas personas han suscitado tanta pasión, tanto interés, tanta fascinación como las publicaciones que seguimos de Melissa Bruntlett y Chris Bruntlett, que también nos acompaña hoy por aquí. Pero este plenario se titula Cycling Towards Empathy, va a ser en inglés, Reimagining More Inclusive Spaces in Our Cities, reimaginando espacios más inclusivos en nuestras ciudades. Y vamos a tener a uno de los referentes internacionales en el campo de la movilidad activa y el rediseño de ciudades para poner, lo que siempre decimos, a las personas en el centro de la ciudad otra vez. Melissa es directora de Modacity Creative y ha dedicado su carrera a la comunicación, a la incidencia y a la transformación urbana. Es coautora con Chris de 3 libros imprescindibles, Building the Cycling City, Curbing Traffic y el más reciente, que se va a publicar este octubre, que se va a llamar Women Changing Cities, las mujeres cambian las ciudades. Aviso a navegantes, esperamos traducciones en castellano, en portugués y en galego. Como canadiense y neerlandesa, que vive en los Países Bajos y trabaja en todo el mundo, Melissa tiene una gran capacidad para traducir las mejores prácticas globales a contextos locales, combinando sensibilidad urbana, mirada de género y acción colectiva. Su trabajo pone el foco en las personas, en las historias y en sus trayectorias y en sus derechos. Cree profundamente que una transición hacia una movilidad más justa comienza con la empatía y que cuanto antes comprendan esto, quienes diseñan nuestras ciudades, más humanas y más habitables serán. Por favor, un fuerte aplauso para Melissa Bruntlett.
Thank you very much, Julio. And we'll just, perfect. I'm going to go up here. I feel a little more comfortable in the front of the stage if I can. Also because I'm short and I find when I'm back there that you can't see me. And I dressed like this for a reason. Anyway, so first of all, I wanted to say a big thank you to the ConBici organizers who invited me to come today. It's a real privilege to come and speak to global audiences about the work that I have the privilege of doing, because I think that these stories that are happening around the world are important for everybody to hear. So thank you, Julio, for the introduction, and to the team for inviting me. And as was said, I'm going to be talking today about the importance of empathy in reimagining how we see our cities. We've already heard an introduction to who I am, so I don't need to do this too much, but all this to say, I focus a lot on equity and inclusion. So who are we trying to invite into our cycling and walking and public transport spaces? And why is it important to be, making space for people that aren't just those of us that are in the room that have the opportunities to cycle everywhere that we would like to. And so I do that largely through storytelling. So I'm hoping to walk you through a little bit of a story arc today in terms of what empathy can look like in cities. But first, I like to start with, let's see. Whoop. Now I'm not moving. Oh, I went too far. Okay. There we go. I think it's important to start with a bit of a definition in terms of understanding what is urban vitality. A lot of what we're doing when we're working on advocating and designing, planning, making policies for cycling is really trying to improve urban vitality in our cities. And I think that Jane Jacobs did it quite perfectly in her seminal book in defining what that can be in terms of spaces and places that are welcoming for a variety of people, at a variety of ages, doing a variety of activities, at a variety of times of day. But I also like to include into that a variety of modes. I know this is a cycling conference, but how we make space together for walking and public transportation and other ways of moving, micromobility, is just as important in that realization of urban vitality, and really places that are welcoming for whatever we want to do at any time of day. And so that's sort of where I like to start with, to get us all working from the same page. I don't want to click too fast again. There we go. So what is the link between, too fast. urban vitality and empathy in terms of our spaces? Well, it really comes down to thinking about the people that we're trying to benefit, and that starts with kids. We all began our journey in cities at a young age, doing all of the things that children do. And our role as practitioners now is to remember the role of children and what they do best, which is play, and sometimes risky play. And how do we bring that into our cities? How do we ensure that we're creating environments where children can learn their limits, they can travel in a means that makes sense for children, which is walking and cycling, because we know they can't drive yet, and really designing that well into our cities so they feel welcome in the space. This whole journey that we're on is all about learning about our place in it, our freedom, autonomy, how we can move independently, and designing well for walking and cycling and good quality public space gives children that ability to be free on their own terms at an earlier age. And we see when we do that they're happier, they're healthier, they're more integrated with their communities, and ultimately on the right path to feeling that feeling of autonomy and connection throughout their lives. So of course, then from there we go into what does that look like when we get old? Just as with children, as we're trying to inspire freedom and autonomy for them, we're also trying to do that for ourselves as we age. We're trying to make sure that even as we get older, our bodies become a little more challenged in terms of how far we might be able to move, we can still do so on our terms. We don't have to be dependent on other people to move us around in a car or other means. And so when we're looking at empathy from an cycling-friendly environment, we are really thinking about how can we ensure that those of us that have enjoyed cycling for most of our lives, myself included, can still do that when we've moved into older adulthood, when we are in our 65, 70 plus years, that we can still have that connection to our communities and to intergenerational connection as well, simply by moving actively. From there, that variety of activities I talked about is looking at the role of caregiving. What does that look like in our cities, and how are we designing for that in our towns and villages as well? And it comes from remembering that everything we do, all of the activities that we perform in a day, are founded with somebody starting out with with providing care work. From the moment someone helps you get ready in the morning, to taking children to school, to running errands, to doing groceries, this is all the work and mobility of care. And so urban vitality really is about making sure that no matter who is moving around the city, they can still do that comfortably, but we are prioritizing care work in that. Understanding that not everybody is commuting to and from work. They might be going from home to drop off kids, to the store, to work, back again, in a much different way of moving, but can be quite well and easily done by bike and by walking. And so that, when we're thinking of urban vitality and empathy, is remembering that not everybody is doing the same trip at the same time of day, and the more that we can design and plan for that, the better. From there, also looking at accessibility. We are all, each and every one of us, are on a scale from well to unwell, able to disabled. And while we are here talking about cycling, we have to remember that the infrastructure that we're designing is not just for two-wheeled travel. It can be for 3, sometimes 4 if it's electrified. I had the wonderful opportunity of being on a 5-wheeled cycle while at VeloCity in Gdansk a couple weeks ago. But these are all tools to ensure that even if someone has limited physical mobility, they still have equal access to the city. And so when we talk about accessibility, when we talk about empathy, it's understanding that we want to be ensuring what we're designing, what we're planning and advocating for are enabling environments that ensure even when we ourselves might experience limited mobility, or someone else that we know can't get on a bicycle all the time, they have another option. And that connects well to looking at accessibility from a prosperity perspective. I know this is a cycling conference, and I want each of you to remember that cycling is connected to walking and is connected to public transport. And the better that we can do that, the more prosperous we can ensure people can be in their lives, not just in terms of work, but also in terms of accessing education, accessing healthcare, when we integrate all of those modes, the multimodality that we heard about earlier, we ensure that we're providing options, sustainable options for people as we move closer and closer to a more sustainable and just transition. When we really look at how do we connect our cycling network to public transportation, not just the trains like what I get to enjoy in the Netherlands, but also buses, trams, all of those different ways of going a little bit further, knowing that a bike and walking will only take us so far, and really helping each of us to reach our full potential. And then finally from there, what we're talking about here is creating connected cities. Connected through transport, connected through social interaction, connected through face-to-face contact with each other, which releases this wonderful hormone called oxytocin, known as the feel-good hormone. Just by seeing somebody, making eye contact, having a little smile, it can help to boost our day. But it also helps to boost the social connection to each other. We feel much more trusting of each other, much more invited into public space. And we can do that by thinking about how walking and cycling with public transport really help to encourage that, not just with the people that we know in our own bubble, but with our whole society. And yeah, really being much more urban vitality experienced. So from there, what does that look like? I can talk to you about the groups that benefit and how they benefit in terms of physical benefits, mental health benefits, but I think it's important to also see what that looks like. And with my husband, Chris, we've been fortunate enough to travel to a number of places in the last couple of years to see what does urban vitality look like in reality and how is it linked to empathy. And I figured, since I'm here in Spain, many of you are from Barcelona, but I thought it would be good to talk about it a little bit. In terms of, first, the Super IA project, which has helped to realize urban vitality in a number of areas throughout the city, in very different ways, but always about creating these connected environments that are inviting for children, they're inviting for people with disabilities, older adults, to come, to roll through slowly, to reclaim space, to envision it in another way. And what that looks like for those who maybe haven't experienced it themselves is really calming environments. You have, of course, you still have the access on wheels of any kind, but what I think is so special about this and in the various ones that we got to experience at all times of day, again, we did walk through some of these spaces at night as well, is just how many people are in these spaces, sitting, having coffee, enjoying a conversation, that are from a variety of ages. One thing that we noticed in particular was a lot of older adults coming and spending time outdoors. Jeanette Sanz told us about a story of someone sending a letter to her saying, "Thank you for realizing this project. My 80-year-old mother now comes downstairs every morning to have coffee with her friends, where before she wouldn't." And also seeing young women outdoors by themselves at all hours of day, not feeling uncomfortable. And so that's what these kinds of public spaces can help to realize, is these social connections to people that might have felt excluded from them prior to. Stop. There we go. Oh, see, too far again. And of course, there's the BC bus, which we were very fortunate to partake in. When looking at, how are we making sure that children in Barcelona can still travel? Of course, the BC bus is a soft form of protest. It is not quite safe enough for children to cycle comfortably to and from school unaccompanied by parents. From what we had heard, this is not my opinion, this is from other people. But what this BC bus does, whether it's Barcelona or other areas of Spain or other areas of Europe or elsewhere, is it shows that there is this demand, that children want this autonomy to move. They want to be able to cycle to school. And we have to remember that. That's our job, is to advocate for them when they aren't advocating for themselves. To say, these are wonderful movements that can help bring children out, show them what's possible, and also build a new generation of cycling advocates. And then connecting that with public space is, of course, the school streets that are realized. That connection to the temporary and sometimes permanent interventions is the word I'm looking for. for school street spaces, so removing car traffic and making sure that it's comfortable to walk into, cycle into, and play. But also understanding that these spaces are not just school spaces during the day, Monday to Friday, but also social spaces for the community outside of that. And so it's this perfect integration of mobility, public space, creating connection, creating that social cohesion that is helping to change how many of us that aren't in Barcelona or aren't in Spain understand how public spaces can be, and helping to inspire others to think differently. Moving from there to Brussels, a notorious car city. If you talk to most people, at least in Northern Europe, they'll say, oh, Brussels is the worst. And they're transforming as well. Through the Good Move program, they're looking at how can we reclaim space, how can we reimagine space, so that people feel more comfortable to walk and cycle in a city that maybe has been quite hostile in the past. This photo here is from Place de Bourse. It is in November. It's very rainy, very cold, but people are still outside enjoying retail space, enjoying a coffee together. And this, as with many projects, started out as a temporary, let's close the space to cars, open it to people, one weekend here and there and see how it goes. And it's now permanent and vibrant at all times of year, showing that even spaces in our city centers that we don't think can transform can. And with that, also looking at the importance of slowing speeds. We know countless cities throughout Europe are understanding the value, not just in terms of physical safety, but also changing the feel of moving through a street simply by slowing the speeds to 30 kilometers an hour or less. And now Brussels, on most of its streets, has done this and has used that opportunity to expand its cycling network, because now it is much more comfortable for more people who might have been part of that interested but concerned group that would have been otherwise fearful of cycling next to cars moving 50, 60, 70 kilometers per hour, are now doing so more, and they're seeing their numbers increase and the types of people cycling diversify simply by slowing speeds and making more room for cycles. And as I mentioned earlier, that has to happen with good investment in other networks. And so the Good Move is also about creating good spaces for walking, pedestrianizing a lot of the streets in the city, largely in the city center, but also expanding out, and integrating it with good public transport. Again, knowing that the bike will maybe only get you so far. Brussels is a very large city. So ensuring that people can cycle to transit and take transit to get a bit further, and integrate that with good bike sharing schemes as well. So moving from, I don't know what the secret is. There we go. Okay, so moving from Western Europe to Eastern Europe. Oh gosh. There we go. Tirana, Albania has been doing a lot in terms of reclaiming space, but looking at that first from the role of children. What that has been able to achieve is understanding in a very young city. Tirana has a very storied history. But in terms of its establishment as it is today, it is still very young. It also has a very young population. And so how do we retain that? How do we ensure that people stay here and that their children feel comfortable moving around? And that's first by investing in play. So this photo here is from the Grand Park in Tirana. It's sort of the green lung of the city, and it was home to the first playground project that they implemented in this way of thinking of children first. And what is special about the playground here is that it's for all ages. It's not just for young children who might need a small swing and slide. It's also looking at teenagers and how are they integrated into that space. So play spaces from 0 to, let's say, 18, but also social spaces where young girls will feel comfortable spending time together, and really creating these welcoming environments for kids. And that's what I think we need to remember when we're talking about cycling or any other form of mobility or public space is we are looking at, how are we inspiring the next generation to get outdoors? It's the argument, the age-old argument us parents hear all the time. Why don't you go outside, go play with friends? But if we're not creating spaces that make them feel welcome, they're not going to come. And so that's what they're trying to do in Tirana. Similarly, they're looking at the role of bike. I don't want to press it again, just in case. Yeah, see? There we go. They're looking at the role of cycling in terms of how children experience the city. They have 2 of these traffic gardens, one in the Grand Park and one in the city center, where they're training hundreds of children on how to cycle, from young as about 6, 7, 8, up to 12, 13, 14, teaching them the skills to cycle in a safe environment, helping them understand how they can move so that they can start transitioning to the cycling infrastructure that is being slowly rolled out in Tirana. And this is, a really important part of this age-friendly approach, is we're trying to inspire children to get on bikes, to become lifelong cyclists themselves, and also help adults understand the role that cycling can have in their freedom and autonomy. And Eden Pedraj, who's the bicycle mayor and also working on this cycling school or traffic garden program and cycling education, is really seeing that impact and, seeing many children leave with smiles and understanding how a bike is transformative for them, but also transformative for the city. And then, in terms of the largest transformation there, this used to be a 3-lane massive roundabout in the heart of the city of Tirana, home to a number of very important cultural institutions. It's home to one of the oldest mosques in Albania, but also home to the National Museum, the Opera House. And you can imagine if it was swirling with cars, it would be quite unwelcome to spend time. But now, it's a beautiful living room in the city where you see people rolling through, people staying, children playing. You won't be able to hear him, but there's a young boy moving around here just playing a drum, which I thought was hilarious. He was doing it for like an hour. Just banging away, but it's this beautiful moment of social connection in a city that maybe didn't have that space before. And so a reminder that we can transform. Sometimes we can do big transformations like this that really create a new environment in our city that is supporting mobility, supporting social connection, and really supporting a cohesion to the city. So, going to Canada. I am Canadian. I was born in Ottawa. I lived in many places in Ontario. If you ask me where I'm from in Canada, I'll say it's complicated because I eventually moved to the West Coast. But Montreal is very dear to my heart. It's where my family grew up before they had me. And so I spent a lot of time there. And what's fascinating about Montreal is it sits under the radar for most people around the world. They don't know that Montreal has been investing in cycling in public space since the 80s. And this program here, the Open Streets program, has been happening for some time now. Several years ago, they started with one street on Rue Montréal to open it up for pedestrians every summer, close it to through traffic, and really invite people to come, spend time, and retailers to benefit. That program has expanded to 11 streets throughout the city. I'm doing it again. Boop. There we go. There. This is Rue Montréal. The program itself has expanded not just in terms of the number of streets, but also the length. So it used to be just July and August in the heat of the summer in Montreal, and now starts sometimes as early as May and goes into September, October, because people loved it so much. They love to come and just sit and spend time. The retailers are benefiting, both shop retail, but also the service industry. So hospitality in terms of people spending money. Again, this video wasn't taken on the weekend. This was taken during the middle of the week. People are spending time outdoors, not just on their free time on the weekend, but all throughout the day. And it's really changing how people in Montreal see their city. Of course, it's a very cold city in the winter, and so to have these inviting spaces in the summer is really helping to show people in Montreal how their city can be different, and really also helps to invite people to spend time outside of controlled environments around other people. At the same time, they are investing in sponge city approaches, understanding that Montreal, while very snowy in the summer, experiences a lot of rain in the spring and a lot of snow in the winter, not summer. and then a lot of rain in the spring and early summer. And they need to capture that, knowing that by end of summer, they experience high moments of drought. And so these kinds of rain gardens or reclamation of space, this was a former through street, is helping to do that, helping to maintain that green, helping to provide that cooling that we know comes from increased plants. But it's also providing opportunities for new reclamation of space like the cycle lane next to it, which is also part of a larger network. I mentioned that Montreal has been investing in cycling since the 80s. Their first bike lane was built in the early 80s, separated bike lane, and it's been expanding into a larger and larger network, definitely spurred even further by COVID in 2020, 2021. The REV, or REV network that they have there is focused on connecting the neighborhood routes together into longer distance routes that are getting people from the neighborhoods on one side of the mountain in Montreal. It is a real mountain, but it's not like a mountain. But getting them from one side to the other to get to the economic centers and education centers in the heart of the city. And really providing people in Montreal a real opportunity to experience cycling. Again, not just in the summer. I do prefer to go in the summer because it's a little bit warmer, but all through the year. And so what has actually been extended from that is the Bixi Bike Share program is now available all year round, where it was formerly only available in the spring to early autumn or late autumn. And so showing that Montrealers want to get on bikes, they want to move around actively, they want this option, and their cycling network keeps expanding to accommodate for that. Then from there, moving to Latin America, in Bogotá, is also a city that is quite famous for expanding out its cycling network, looking at how to connect Bogotanos with the rest of the city, understanding that the public transport, as successful as the bus system has been there, it is at capacity or beyond. And so they need other options, and cycling is part of that. And so you see wonderful cycle lanes in the heart of the city, but what's important is you also see that in non-heart of the city areas. This video is from one of the informal communities on the outer edges of the city. And what I got to experience there, now please mind the chaos, it is still people getting used to moving around a little bit differently. But what I thought was so beautiful is you were seeing people of all ages cycling, people of varying abilities at some points. You see parents cycling with children in an area that maybe in other cities we might say was impossible. And it just comes by building a network and connecting it, not just to the places where it's easy, but to the places where it might be hard as well. And so this is my reminder from a case study from Bogotá that it is possible. It's possible in places where we think it might be impossible. And by creating that space, you're creating that invitation. At the same time, they're looking at the role of care. How do we ensure that women in Bogotá have access to the same mobility options, the same employment options, and that is through the Care Blocks program, where they are providing services to women who mainly felt that they could not leave to go to work because of their varying care duties, providing childcare so they can take training programs to learn new skills to enter the workforce, finish high school education to make sure that they have the skills they need. And what it's offering is dozens and dozens of unique services to women that formerly didn't have those options, largely in lower income areas, from childcare like you see here, but also laundry services, care for older adults to ensure that there's no barrier to their entry into the workforce, and then at the same time understanding they need to train them with new skills as well. So women that formerly weren't able to cycle can learn to do so, to move around the city in different ways. I believe that most people living on the edges of the city experience up to 2 hours commute each way, and so cycling helps to hopefully provide an integrated option that helps to shorten that and alleviate some of that transport burden, that time that they don't get to spend at home, but also providing them the opportunity to become independent and achieve their potential. And then finally, almost got there, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about Paris. Paris has been in the news a lot for the last several years, but that's because they are dramatically changing their streets. They are dramatically reimagining how space can be used. with temporary closures like on the Champs-Élysées. Again, this photo is from the heart of winter. I think it's the beginning of December. It was cold and dark, and people were still outside enjoying public space together. So it's to show that it's not a seasoned activity. This can happen at all times of year, at all times of day. But really showing Parisians and those of us that get to visit that the city can be different. Including a rapidly expanding cycling network. Paris is enjoying a bit of a renaissance, I guess you could say, when it comes to cycling, and we are now seeing more people on bikes than in cars in the city of Paris because they're understanding people need an option to get around. The Vélib has been so successful for a long time, but the space for doing so safely was maybe a bit challenging and limiting some people. And so again, through a COVID measure, taking that one step further, understanding that when we connect the network, when we widen it, when we make it safer, we invite more people, different people to come and cycle. And you're seeing that happen, and that transformation in terms of who feels comfortable on a bike in Paris. Basically every time we get to visit, but they're obviously experiencing it in real time. And that includes connecting it with schools. Paris has been quite successful at realizing over 200 school streets, understanding that children deserve the right to leave school and feel safe and comfortable. Parents deserve that right not to have to walk their kids to and from the front door of the school for fear of their safety. And so by transforming these spaces, they're giving that right back to kids to experience what many of us might have experienced when we were younger as well. But they're also creating community assets, just like in Tirana, just like in Barcelona, just like any place that's building school streets. They're creating community assets where outside of school hours, people can come, spend time, be social outside of their homes, and have this wonderful space to meet. And it's quite dramatic in terms of how it looks. So I could hear people in the room potentially saying, yeah, but in Spain, our streets are so narrow, we can't change them. Well, this is 2 lanes of parking. It's supposed to be 2 lanes of movement, I believe, plus cycling, and then it will transform in a moment. It's coming. Oh, no. Dang. Okay, well, I'll just talk for a minute anyway. It comes with reimagining. How can we think of this space a little bit differently? How can we maybe reclaim some of this car space? How can we create a much more warm environment for children to leave school from? And we can create that. We can take away the access to cars. Those cars will find somewhere else to be. There's always somewhere else. But we can put in trees, we can add shade, we can create these community assets simply by thinking about the space a little bit differently. So, no. My apologies. Oh, back it up. So what is the role of leadership in all of this? So I've talked about who's benefiting, I've talked about what it can look like, and there are many examples, not just from the ones you've seen, of reclamation of space and reimagining, thinking about those from an empathetic lens. But there's a role of leadership in that, and I'm not just talking about political leaders, I'm talking about all of us in this room. We are all leaders for cycling advocacy, and we have a role to play in helping that to be realized. And that starts with leading with empathy, and coming back to that theme. And what that means is we need to listen. We can't just tell people what we think the space should be. We might know that if we put in a cycle lane and we widen a sidewalk and we slow traffic, that it will make the environment better. But if we don't talk to the people in those communities, if we don't listen to what their challenges are, and those challenges might be, I don't know how to cycle, I don't have an access to a bike, I'm afraid to do it even if the street is safe. Understanding that and then coming at it from a place of humility, knowing we might not have all the answers, is really helpful in moving that conversation forward, building more champions, building more understanding so we can find success. And that only comes with being empathetic to the people that are maybe not having the same experiences as us. Next is to have a long-term vision. A lot of times we're looking maybe 5 years in the future. We know if we do this now, in 5 years we hope to achieve this. And that's laudable, and we should still do that. But what is the long-term legacy of what we're trying to do? How can we build this in? It can be, as in Barcelona's case, creating policy that is gender-focused so that we know even if politics changes, there is something in place to say we need to keep thinking about gender in our mobility planning and public space design. Or thinking, we're creating these open streets in Montreal, but how do we then take this to the next level? How do we make these permanent? Having those long-term plans is key to that leadership and success in a lot of the projects that you've seen today. Similarly, valuing the work of care. I come back to this a lot because we tend to be so focused in the mobility world on getting to and from work. And we forget that care work is, like I said earlier, the foundation of everything that we do. We cannot function in our daily lives unless somebody else is providing that role of care for us. And so we need to be remembering that and remembering how that is influenced by the mobility and access around us and making sure that we're building that into our practices. We also need to build alliances. I'm sure many of us feel that we're often talking to the bubble, talking to people that feel the same way as us, and we need to be building alliances across those or outside of that bubble with people that seem like the unusual suspects, because that's how we find success. The more we can create that common ground, that common understanding, even if we have different opinions, the more we can achieve greater success. And then finally, I went too far, there we go. We need to prioritize impact over power. And if there's one lesson that came out of all of the research that we did for Women Changing Cities, it has been this, is understanding that those of us that are selected or elected to do a job, we have a certain amount of time to do it, and we were chosen to do it, and so that's our responsibility. Just because it's hard, we can't say, well, I know I said I would do that, but it's too hard, I can't do it anymore. It's understanding that even if you're only there for a short period of time, that impact can be lasting. And we've seen it in the case of Paris, we see it in Montreal, we see it in New Zealand with Jacinda Ardern. Lots of people understanding that it's important to do what we're brought in to do in the time that we have, and also recognizing when it's time to step aside and make space for new energy and new ideas. We're creating a legacy of change, and that only happens when we remember that it's about making that impact over having that power and being in that seat forever. So with that, I am going to go to the last slide. Again, too far. There we go. So I would like to say gracias for having me. I hope that there's some lessons that you can draw for the various places that you're coming from. And really, again, I do appreciate being able to come and talk to audiences about what I get to see in terms of my role as a storyteller, in terms of what I get to learn to hopefully help you see other places and what's happening around the world and inspire change and transformation where you are. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Melissa, for such an insight, so inspiring and so necessary. Digo que gracias a Melissa por su visión tan inspiradora y tan necesaria. Tendemos a olvidar que la bicicleta lo que cambia son las relaciones en la calle, en el espacio público, y que esto lo que mejora es la vida de las personas. Necesitamos buenas infraestructuras, necesitamos seguridad, pero no perder de vista eso que tenemos tan presente. Hemos ido del Atlántico al Mediterráneo y de vuelta, de la vida en la calle. No sé si tenemos tiempo para a lo mejor alguna pregunta, ¿cómo andamos? I'll translate also for the audience that in that trip to the Mediterranean and back and to the Atlantic, we cannot forget how important we value here the street life. We like to be outdoors, but we need the good standards, we need the infrastructure, we need the safety. But we cannot forget that it's a life, daily life, what bicycle is actually changing, is improving it. So I don't know if we have time for one question or two.
Hi, Melissa. Thank you so much. It's been very, very helpful, very interesting to see all these stories, successful stories around the world. I'm Giuseppe Grezzi, I'm from Valencia. I've been in charge of mobility for 8 years. But my question is, and also it's very interesting for other administrators and politics from other cities, why there are some cities that succeed and there are others that don't succeed to transform the city to live better in their cities?
That's a great question. And it's a little bit of the thesis of the book, so I won't give too much of it away. Book number 3. But I think some cities are moving forward because they have that bravery. And I have been to Valencia, and I know that there's been some regression in recent years, but there's a lot of progression. And what we have to do is remember that sometimes we might not get as far as we would like to, but what it takes, and oftentimes in cities that are moving further ahead, is that coalition between advocacy, between the people, civil servants working at the city level, with the politicians that are the champions, working together, understanding that it's not easy, and sometimes we might not achieve 100% of the goal that we would like, but it's not, what's important is not to stop, is to keep trying to move forward. We will experience setbacks. I often say I've been working in communications around mobility now for 15 years. I've been saying the same messages over and over for 15 years, and we have to remember that that's part of the job, is making the same points over and over, because you're always going to find one person who hasn't heard it before and suddenly starts to be to understand, to be more in favor, and starts to become a champion as well. And so I think that's it. It's that coalition or collaboration and that determination. Even in the face of pushback, whether that's from the public or politicians. So, yeah, this job that we have is not easy, and I wish that people didn't misunderstand the role of cycling in our cities as much as they do, but we are seeing that change, and I think the reason that we experience more and more of that pushback is because we are being successful, and so we just can't stop, unfortunately, but one day maybe we can.
Hello. Thank you, Melissa, for showing so many insightful examples, also from Barcelona, from my city. But I was wondering, in the Spanish cities, most of people walk for commuting. It's like around 60% in many towns, in many cities. Do you think cycling has a big potential still with this amount of walking of pedestrians? No? We saw yesterday walking in Santiago, no? How difficult can be walking in such narrow streets, and our politicians this morning were saying this. No? This is also one of our challenges, no? How to push for cycling while we keep the pedestrians being always the first. And I guess your experience in the Netherlands, you can also share that in the Netherlands, the pedestrian is not first, is the cyclist. So how can we handle with this challenge in our towns to keep on pushing for cycling without, with keeping still the pedestrians the first?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thanks, Sylvia. I think this is often the conversation in Spanish cities. It's how do we make sure we don't take away from cycling by investing in or take away from walking by investing in cycling. In cities in Switzerland is how do we make sure we don't take from public transport. And I think what's important is that we are not enhancing one network in place of another. And so we know that in Spanish cities, and I assume also in Portuguese cities, that walking is one of the most common ways of people to move around sustainably. So how can we complement that in the distances that are too far to get to by walking? Where a bike would be a more convenient option than having to hop on the metro or a bus or a tram. So how can we complement walking in a way that makes sense? We might not get everybody out of their cars onto a bike, but we might be able to provide more options for those that are already walking, or someone that's taking public transport more often and sees it as a more convenient option because they're more in control of their trips. So I think we just have to be careful that we're not pitting people, these sustainable modes up against each other, and really just creating those complementary networks as best that we can.
Any other question? Or... Bueno, pues como hay muchos otros contenidos y otros talleres que están esperando, sí quiero transmitiros también una reflexión desde ConBici. Esto que hemos hablado de esta inclusividad, este congreso quiere ser precisamente eso, un espacio donde escuchemos, donde aprendamos y repensemos las ciudades desde el cuidado, desde la inclusión y desde las personas. Seguimos con más sesiones a lo largo del día, os animamos a participar en todas ellas, con que muchas gracias y nos vemos en las próximas mesas.